Greetings and welcome to LA Quill. Today we're diving into chapter 27 of Arianna's tale. Darian sat in his chair, quite stunned by what he heard only a moment ago. His mind was whirling with the information he'd just been given. Every conversation he'd ever been privy to in Sitha regarding the Empire was suddenly foremost in his mind. All the pieces were beginning to fall into place. All those things that he'd only half understood were making sense for the first time. Tarius looked at his friend. "I know, I was shocked too," he said. "I found it all so hard to believe, but I don't think they're lying." Darian shook his head, wanting everyone to understand his reaction. "I know that it's true." He turned his eyes upon Damuk. "I've seen the crystal, or at least I'm pretty sure I have." Damuk had suspected as much and wasn't surprised. Tarius and Arianna, however, were full of questions. Damuk held up his hand for silence. "Let Darian speak," he ordered. He was a little surprised that Arianna obeyed him. Maybe she's actually coming around, he thought to himself. If she would only obey him once in a while. He decided not to get his hopes up. Putting aside his own thoughts, he turned his attention to Arianna's brother. Darian took a moment to compose his thoughts. "My father, King Cadfael, is not particularly fond of me, so the information I do have is sketchy at best. He shares as little information as possible with me, or with anyone really." He got more comfortable in his chair before continuing. "The crystal you spoke of, it's on the tip of my father's scepter. It's blue, like you said, but it's more than that. The crystal looks like flowing water, at least up close. You can tell just by looking that it's not normal. It's eerie, really. I asked about it once, but I never did get a straight answer. Now I know why." "He probably doesn't know what it really is," Arianna commented. "Oh, he knows." Darian finally accepted the wine that had been offered earlier, feeling foolish for turning it down before. "For one thing, the scepter never leaves his hands, not even when he sleeps. And there was one incident. It was several months ago now. Not so much an incident as it was a conversation I happened to overhear. I'm not sure that my father even realized I was in the room. He and Kale, one of the senior senators, were actually discussing the war. They talked about it mostly in general terms, how long it had gone on and that sort of thing. I was hardly paying attention. Then they started talking about the possibility of an imperial invasion, a real bid to end this war, not the small skirmishes that have happened for the last 300 years. They seemed to think that there was real reason for haste on your part," he said, indicating Damuk. "Not you specifically, but the Imperials." Damuk hadn't moved a muscle. This was no more than he had expected. Finally, he spoke softly. "Did they say why?" Darian shook his head. "Not specifically. They talked about how desperate the Imperials had to be at this point. And then my father said something about how no one would be able to get near the scepter." He closed his eyes, trying to remember correctly. "I'm almost certain that they said something about time running out for the Empire. Maybe I heard it wrong. Like I said, I wasn't paying attention." Damuk sighed. "You didn't hear it wrong, but at least you've confirmed that both your king and his senate are very well aware of the situation." "What about a time limit?" Arianna asked, rising from the chair. "You never said anything about that. Not to me, anyway." Damuk moved into the chair Arianna had vacated and pulled her into his lap. "It wasn't relevant to the conversation at the time," he explained. She squirmed into a more comfortable position and gave him a reproachful look. "Well, I think it's relevant now." She was heartily tired of being left out and decided right then and there that she was going to play an active role in her husband's life. He might as well get used to it. He nodded, smiling at her tone. "Within the next 10 months, the crystal will lose its power. When the spell that trapped our waters was cast, it was set with a limit, a set number of years after which the crystal would crumble to dust. 3 sets of 99 years, which works out to 297 years. Everyone thought about that for a moment, but it was Tarius who spoke first. "Doesn't that mean that the spell would be reversed, that the water would then be returned to the desert?" Damuk shook his head. "Not really. With this particular spell, if we do not retrieve the crystal and perform the ritual which will release the waters, they'll be gone forever." He pulled his betrothed a little closer to him. She laid her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She loved his scent, a mix of musk and sandalwood. Arianna knew that she could happily smell nothing else for the rest of her life. Darian's eyes narrowed as he saw how familiar the darker man was with his little sister. He again had to remind himself that she was no longer a child. He wanted to spring across the desk before him and strangle the man who held his little sister. Instead, Darian only asked, "So if we don't get the crystal, that's it?" His voice was strained, but he kept himself under control. "Yes, so you can see why we need your help." He looked directly at the younger man, knowing exactly what was going through his mind. He moved one hand to Arianna's thigh. He knew he was baiting the younger man, but he couldn't help himself. "We've tried all we can think of, but even our best spies cannot get near Cadfael." "I'm not surprised," Taria said. "He's paranoid. He only has those around him who he's absolutely certain of." He gave a little half-laugh. "I'm not even allowed in the throne room, and I'm Darian's best friend." "Why haven't you tried to invade by sea?" Darian asked suddenly. "I'm sure that after this long, despite having so little coastal area and little experience at sea, your captains would have been able to navigate the coast, and you've got to have worthy vessels by now. Even you Imperials had to have thought of that." Falling silent, Damuk thought about what to tell them, ignoring the indirect insult. Tarius he trusted instinctively, and they were becoming fast friends. But Darian, well, it was hard to trust a man who put his own entertainment above the welfare of his sister. That thought had him glancing down at the girl in his lap. Arianna was looking at him intently. She knew that the Empire had been trying to invade by sea because he'd told her. He'd also told her why they hadn't tried until the last 10 years. She also knew about the Meridian and how he was the sole survivor of its most recent attack. And now, undoubtedly, she was wondering why he wasn't telling the two young men what exactly he had been up to when he'd wound up in her cottage the first time. Arianna shifted again. "You can trust them, Damuk." He sighed. She was probably right, and now she'd be insulted if he didn't. She'd suddenly think that he didn't trust her. "We've tried," he said in response to Darian's question. "We probably would have succeeded too if it hadn't been for the sea creature, the Meridian, that destroyed our ships each time we've tried in the last 10 years. It's how he ended up in Akana Valley the first time," Arianna offered, now free to discuss it because Damuk had brought it up first. "The Meridian destroyed his ship." "What's a Meridian?" Tarius asked. Unexpectedly, it was Darian who answered. "It's a long, snake-like sea creature with leathery wings that resides in the deepest oceans. At least, it's native to the deepest oceans. Bards tell tales of a time when mages were so strong they could force the Meridian into shallow waters, terrorizing coastal cities. It was worshipped as a god thousands of years ago, and those who controlled them were considered avatars of the gods." Everyone was looking at him like he'd grown a second head. "What, I'm not allowed to read sometimes?" "You don't seem the type to spend any time in libraries," Damuk commented wryly. Darian shrugged. "I get bored when all Tarius wants to do is eat." Everyone laughed while Tarius glared at his friend. "Well," Tarius snapped, "what do we do about the situation regarding the crystal?" He did not appreciate their laughter and wanted to steer the conversation away from his eating habits as soon as possible. "Only Darian can answer that," Arianna said, looking pleadingly at her brother. She widened her eyes as she had when she was a child and wanted something from him. It was the look in her eyes that did it. He had let her down so many times already. He just couldn't bear to do it again. Darian met her gaze and spoke slowly. "I'm not sure yet. My father is not likely to relinquish the crystal, especially since if he can just hang on to it a little longer, he basically wins the war by default." "But you will do what you can?" Arianna asked. "I'll try. That's all I can promise." "And that's all we can ask," Damuk replied, deciding to take what he could get. "For now, it's getting late. We should all get some sleep. Tomorrow, we all head home." Arianna smiled. These last few days had been hard on her. She was eager to get back in her own bed. Their bed. It occurred to her that she really did think of Crown City as home. And while that may have distressed her brother, it made her very happy. She only wished that she didn't feel a shadow growing in the back of her mind. It almost felt like a warning, as if something terrible would soon happen. And that's our tale from L.A. Quill today. If you enjoyed this chapter, let me know your favorite moment in the comments. Until next time, may your stories always be magical.